first and foremost, we should talk about Avengers 5, formerly titled Avengers the Kang Dynasty, no longer titled that. It's going to be Avengers something whenever they decide to announce it. But a new article in Deadline just came out last week that essentially said Marvel Studios has effectively chosen their director for the movie. However, it's pretty much up to the director as to whether or not they want to make the movie. Their top choice right now to direct Avengers 5 is director of Deadpool and Wolverine, Shawn Levy. He is currently the top choice and has apparently been having some early conversations to potentially direct Avengers 5. Now, this is interesting for a number of reasons because Shawn Levy is the director of Deadpool and Wolverine, and we've yet to see that movie. You know, we're hoping and anticipating that it's going to be amazing, that it'll be fantastic, but we don't know yet. But obviously, Marvel very close to the production. They're seeing it every step along the way. It appears as if they know something that we obviously as the public do not know, because I think that this is probably a sign of confidence in the product of Deadpool and Wolverine to say like, hey, we want you to direct Avengers 5. Of course, this movie has taken multiple shapes over the past number of years just due to the controversy around Jonathan Majors and now the defocus of apparently the Kang character in the MCU moving forward. Destin Daniel Cretton was also initially signed up to direct this movie until he stepped back, allegedly to focus on other projects that he's developing, such as Wonder Man and the Shang-Chi sequel. There is currently, I think, a script that's in place. Michael Waldron is the writer, but they are still looking for a director. This movie is slated to come out in 2026, so in 2 short years, which means they're going to pretty much be gearing up to go into full production within the year, and they're moving fast and furious on this to get a director in place and to ultimately get the cast in place. We'll talk about casting news and characters in a second, but what do you think about Shawn Levy potentially stepping up to direct this movie? Taking it with a grain of salt, it's obviously not 100% confirmed, but if he were to be the director of Avengers 5, how would you feel about that?
I like Shawn Levy a lot, actually. I think he's a pretty good director. I don't like every movie he puts out. I didn't even like the Atom Project, which came out pretty recently, but I like a lot of his other movies. Now, I think the closest thing he's done to something like this probably is like Free Guy, right? Like something that was a little more wide scale, very nerdy. He knows the labs. Clearly, he knows Ryan Reynolds as well, who would probably be in that Avengers film. Also, I remember seeing it. Wasn't he like slated to do like a Star Wars movie? Maybe like one of the directors that might do a Star Wars movie.
Maybe. I mean, he's worked. So he is confirmed to be working on the final season of Stranger Things. So he'll be deep into development on that. So I don't know how that's going to work in terms of scheduling. But there might have been a rumor out there about Star Wars 2 at some point.
Yeah, and so I like him. I like him a lot. So I'm okay with the pick. I think we've always talked about how I feel like he might fit the MO of a lot of the other directors we get in an Avengers chair. You know what I mean? I feel like he might fit the bill. So I'd feel okay with him. I think. I think the only thing that does make me skeptical is I just don't like every movie he's ever came out with, but I know he's a good. I still like him as a director, so I think I'm fine with it.
I was initially hesitant when I saw this. I'm like, Shawn Levy, I wouldn't have picked that. But at the end of the day, Shawn Levy, incredibly seasoned director, and I just talked about this just now with Star Wars. You got to have somebody seasoned to do this movie. Like, you need somebody that has a lot of experience. I don't think you can just take a new young director, pluck them out of, we did like 2 movies and now we're going to make one of the biggest movies ever. No, we're not doing that. That's not okay. This has to be a seasoned director. And Shawn Levy has been working for a long time, like 20, 25 years. And he's done big movies. Like the whole Night at the Museum franchise was huge. It was epic. And he's done a lot of these recent movies with Ryan Reynolds. They've obviously become best friends, frequent collaborators. He's worked with Hugh Jackman before on Real Steel and now collaborating with him again on this new Deadpool and Wolverine movie. He knows the system now, and it appears, based on this potential choice on the part of Marvel, maybe he did a hell of a job with Deadpool and Wolverine. Maybe he was great. Maybe he worked out and gave them the movie that they hoped for, and maybe even the movie that exceeded their expectations. And so if they're already signaling that this is like their top choice, I'm good with it. He doesn't ring out as like the most obvious choice immediately, but I think in hindsight, when I thought about it and I sat upon it, I'm like, yeah, you got to have somebody that's going to deal with the ridiculously stressful production of what this is going to entail. This is going to be a massive massive undertaking, one of the most difficult productions that will ever be mounted in Hollywood history. You got to have somebody that can handle that. And I think he's proven that he can do it because he's done big budget movies. He's worked with all
Yeah.
the studios. He's worked with streamers. He did the stuff with Netflix. Adam Project sucks, but he's made a lot of good movies too. You know, he's done some really, really good
Exactly.
stuff. And that Free Guy comp is also interesting too, just because not only is it nerdy and it obviously leans into nerd culture and stuff, but it has a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on.
It does.
It's very much centered on Ryan Reynolds as a character, but there's a lot in there. There's just a lot going on, a world that has to be built. And I think it's going to take a director that can really envision what that's going to look like and control all of those moving pieces. And again, just his connection and his relationship with a lot of really well-known actors and people that are reliable and like working with him also says a lot. Like you need a guy that's going to be easygoing that people like to work with. And he's Canadian, and Canadians tend to be friendly. So I think he's probably a really good choice for the movie. And I think if he is indeed the top choice and does move forward and take it on, it'll probably be in the best interest of Marvel. Now, in addition to this news, though, this Deadline article also had something that was kind of buried in the story, but it certainly cannot be looked over. But sources from Deadline close to the project say that potentially more than 60 MCU characters could reprise their roles, including everyone from Mark Ruffalo to Chris Hemsworth to Benedict Cumberbatch to Tom Hiddleston to Simu Liu and to Karen Gillan. We're talking about Hulk, Thor, Doctor Strange, maybe Loki, maybe Shang-Chi, maybe Nebula, maybe everybody that we've ever seen in the MCU, because 60 characters is a lot. But the article goes on to say that unlike the first 4 Avengers movies, which was more focused on a core group, we know the original 6 Avengers, Robert Downey, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Chris Hemsworth, and Mark Ruffalo, this movie would instead be more of an ensemble movie where the characters would have more equal footing instead of focusing on just a handful of characters within the team. So there's a couple of ways to look at this. First and foremost, 60 characters. That raw number is just insane. I did a little experiment. I went back to Avengers Endgame, which would obviously be the biggest production that they've done so far in terms of amount of characters. I searched online to see, well, how many characters are in Avengers Endgame? Saw some conflicting numbers, but it looked like the more consistent number that people landed on was 63. 63 characters in Avengers Endgame. Now, that includes heroes, some of the supporting characters. Like, not everybody has powers, but we're talking about characters that reprise their roles from former projects. I also went back to the end credit sequence of Avengers Endgame where they list off everybody that appears in the movie. I counted 54. Now, you say 54, that still does not match over 60. We're still talking about an increase in the amount of characters. First and foremost, how do you feel about that? And then we can get to the news about the focus and what the type of movie it might be, whether it might be a more ensemble feature. But just the raw number of 60 characters, thinking about all the projects, all the films that we've seen, how does that sound to you right now, not knowing what the story of Avengers 5 is going to be?
That's a lot of characters. Man, I think it worries me. It worries me. That's a lot of people. And again, comic books are made for this. Comic book movies should be made for this, but where we stand right now, bro, there's just a lot of people. And I understand where they come from. I easily could count probably like 100 characters that could be in this movie. That's a lot, man. It really is. It's kind of hard to, I think, put in my head 60 characters. And even like you said, Endgame has those. But whew, right now, it just worries me. That's all I can say right now. It worries me. It definitely gives me pause.
So the raw number 60, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. It's an Avengers movie. And we've gotten to the scale of these movies no longer being about 6 or 7 heroes. They are about dozens of characters. What is interesting to me in thinking about the comparison to Avengers Endgame is the fact that in Avengers Endgame, there's 2 key things that work in favor of having that many characters. One, it's the final movie of a saga in which we are concluding the story. We're wrapping up everything, every loose thread, every connection to every previous entry into this universe. Everything will pay off in some form or fashion in this movie. And if you watch Avengers Endgame, literally all 21 movies preceding it have some sort of place in that story. And so to have that amount of characters makes a lot of sense. Secondly, what's really important is that movie has as many characters as it does, because there's an element of time travel in which we go
Mm-hmm.
to the past and we revisit some of the movies that we've already seen. And so it makes even more sense because it's like, yeah, we're actually kind of examining in real time the history of the MCU as we followed it.
Right.
And thinking about Avengers 5, and this is all sort of with a grain of salt because we don't know what the story is. They've obviously pivoted from what it was going to be. This isn't the final movie of a saga. This is the lead up to the final movie, which is at this point still Secret Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And the more important thing is whatever 60 characters or 60 plus characters that we choose, we will have spent significantly less time with each of them individually than
Exactly.
any of the characters that we spent time with in the Infinity Saga. That is a
Mm-hmm.
fact because of just the amount of projects we've gotten on a per year basis from the MCU. We've seen Shang-Chi once. We've seen She-Hulk once. We've seen Moon Knight once. The list goes on
Yep.
and on. The Eternals, like all of these new characters that probably would have a presence in this story, what relationship do we have with them really? First, it has to be a good movie or a good TV show for me to even care, which in the case
Mm-hmm.
of a lot of these shows, they have not been. And then secondly, the amount of time invested into them and the amount of appearances also matters. You know, by the time we get to Avengers Endgame, we've seen all those characters multiple times over. Some of them 7, 8, 9 times in certain cases in the core group. And then many of the other characters, like I'll just throw out a random one. Frigga, Thor's mother. We at least saw her
Mm-hmm.
twice. You know, we had a
That's
relationship
true.
with her. You know what I'm saying?
We
But
did.
how many supporting characters in this new saga have we seen multiple times? Probably not anybody except like a Wong or Doctor Strange, like some of those
Mm-hmm.
more formidable heroes that likely would be at the forefront. So that is the element that worries me more. Just because it's like, yeah, we can have all these characters, they can be a part of the movie. Oh, great! Look at the amount of actors here. Look at all the money that we have to pay everybody to be a part of this movie. But
Mm-hmm.
like, am I gonna care? Am I gonna care when
Exactly.
so and so pops up? Am I gonna even give a fuck when I don't know? I'm just anybody. Like, just pick out, just take your pick. You know, with the exception
Yeah.
of like some of the characters from Black Panther, I'll care about those characters. But like a lot of these
Yep.
people, they're just not gonna do it for me if they pop up on screen. And so that just fascinates me that we've scaled up to this degree, not knowing what the story is, but also we don't have that type of relationship with this new crop of characters as we did with the original Avengers that we saw. Um, the second piece to the story is the potential that it might be more of an ensemble piece as opposed to removing focus from a core group of characters, which I think is interesting because we've consistently asked on this podcast the question of who's the new Avengers team? Like, who is even that team? You know, is
Mm-hmm.
there a starting 5? Is there 10? Like, what are the
Right.
characters that are going to make up our core team? And then how do we build out around that, right? Like, you need your
Yep.
starting players. It sounds like that this movie might not be that. And it might be some conflicting reports out there because there's some rumors that in Captain America Brave New World, Sam Wilson might be trying to build a new Avengers team. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is more of an ensemble feature and we're not really focusing on a core 5 or a core 6 or a core 7, and we're really kind of spreading the wealth across these 60 characters, or let's say half of that, let's say 30 of them kind of are
It's a
the focus
lot.
of the movie. It's still a lot, but let's just chop that in half to be realistic because there's
Mm-hmm.
no way you can focus on 60 characters.
Right.
What do you think about that kind of being a prospect? Because that'll definitely be different than previous Avengers movies that we've seen up until this point.
Yeah. Again, all of this still gives me so much pause because even in those 30 characters, what 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 timeline or what stories have we seen? Again, if we're talking about this movie's happening in 2 years, what's going to happen between now and then to get us to that place to say, oh, these 30 characters, I still care about what they have going on. Let's spend some time with them. And you're telling me the double, I just can't. It's all making me so anxious, even of like, ooh, what are we doing? And sure, there could be something, of course, just like something I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Marvel has still always been good at that. Like, ooh, I don't know this thing that actually turned out to work out very well. That could still be the case here, but I still have so much pause, and a lot of it is to what you just said. Of a lot of those characters we've only seen one time. I just can't imagine this Avengers movie comes out and the people I'm most excited to see is like the characters from Loki. What? How did I get there? Like, how are these the people I'm most excited to see? And we're focusing on these 30 characters, and it's like, man, there's a lot of y'all. Okay, but why are we here? And how sure, I may care about y'all, but to what degree? We cared about Iron Man a ton. We cared about Captain America a ton. Thor, oh, he had such an important presence in Infinity War. You know what I'm saying? We cared about a lot of these characters a lot. And even then, when that happens, when this movie comes out, we would have only seen the Fantastic Four one time. Are we going to be excited to see them? Yes, for sure. Don't get me wrong. I think we'll be happy to see them again. But again, it's only for the second time. And imagine, like you said, out of 30 characters, let's say the Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, is one of those characters. What are you going to do in this runtime with 60 characters? But again, we're reducing it to 30. What are you going to do to help for me to say, man, I surely cared about Sue Storm in this movie? It all gives me pause. It all makes me very worried because one of the cool things about Infinity War was like we didn't have to spend time with introducing anything. And I feel like with a lot of these characters that we seen for the first only one time, you kind of got to do some work to make us care about where they fit in the big puzzle. Their puzzle piece has to be important. And again, that's what gives me so much pause, man. That's what makes me so afraid for all of this is the Thing has probably going to have 4 lines in the movie, if that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I wish that's what made the Endgame so cool is every character that showed up at the end of that movie we had spent some time with. I know why you're here. I know why you were fighting so-and-so. That moment was really cool because I remember back in, I don't know, Age of Ultron, y'all couldn't touch the hammer. Oh my God, Captain America's worthy all of a sudden. Like, we just had spent so much time doing these small little things. And I can't see it, man. It all gives me a lot of pause, and it does make me afraid. And again, I could still be surprised by the end of all of this because there's no way they're also not having some of these conversations. You know what I mean? Like there's no way they're also not like, okay, how are we going to make this work? But again, from an initial like, this is what might be going down. I'm afraid, man. I really am.
So you telling me you're not gonna be lit and excited when the hippo from Moon Knight shows up? Like when she pops up on screen, you're not gonna fucking clap your hands and scream.
The hippo.
What was her name? Towerette, something like that.
Yeah, Towerette.
Yeah. No, they have their work cut out for them because in addition to everything you just said, we're also making great assumptions that people have even watched these fucking television shows on Disney Plus to give a fuck about any of these characters. Because 2/3 of the 60 are going to come from the TV shows. That's what you've produced the most of in the past 4 to 5 years. We haven't even done as many movies as we've done shows. And so if we're truly bringing the entire MCU together, you have to bring in a lot of characters from the Marvels and a lot of characters from She-Hulk and Moon Knight and I guess Falcon and Winter Soldier will be taken care of in Captain America. But, I think the massive audience that did follow the MCU because it was primarily theatrical and it was relatively easy to follow. You just had to watch this movie, then the next movie, then the next movie. It's now become unwieldy with 6 episodes of a television show. And don't let that show have 2 seasons. Like, oh, a Hawkeye show, a Christmas show. Like, what is that? I've heard several accounts of people that didn't watch the Infinity Saga as it was happening, but they binged it and they loved it. It was amazing. That was that whole COVID experiment that a lot of people did. They tried the whole TV show thing, and then after like the second show, they were like, "This is just too much. I can't keep up. I cannot keep up." And so now we're taking some great assumptions that people have even seen some of these people. Period. Forget the appearance that they've had. Like it's asking a lot, I think, of people because there's no way you're pulling 60 characters from just movies, which have made you the most money. They have to come from all corners. And so, I don't know how this is going to work and the ensemble nature of it. I like that idea. I do like the idea of like spreading the wealth and let's not just focus on 6 or 7 people. Let's focus on a bigger group of people. In theory, I really do like that because they haven't truly explored that. I think the closest we've probably gotten was Infinity War because we made these multiple sub teams and split them off. Right. And I love the structure of that movie. Like you had 3 characters here and then another 4 or 5 were here and you just kind of spread the universe out. And so if we take that similar approach, cool, I'm with that. But still, the fact still remains that yeah, bro, that third supporting character from fucking Hawkeye, whoever the fuck, like, what is he really doing here? Do I care? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's all going to depend on the execution, but we'll ultimately have to see as more Avengers 5 news takes shape over the course of I'm assuming the next few months and obviously the next couple of years here.